Welcome to Wholesale Change, the webcast and podcast from Distribution Strategy Group, where we offer thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you, because if you're on this show, you probably are a wholesale change agent. My name's Ian Heller. I'll be your co-host today, along with my business partner, my friend, the doctor of distribution, and the closest thing in my life that I would call a polymath, Jonathan Bine, PhD. Jonathan, how are you today, my friend?
Thank you. Flattered, glad not to be a Pollyanna.
That's my job.
Or a polyglot.
Or a polyglot. But you know what's ironic about a polymath is they know everything and no one knows what a polymath is.
That's right. Yeah. So people are more likely to know what a polynomial is.
Right. And if you were, that's true. And I don't know what that is. I kind of remember. So if you were a pirate and you had a parrot on your shoulder, what would it say?
I don't know.
Polymath want a cracker. That's so bad. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm in a good mood today, and it's not medically induced, I promise. So
okay. Great.
All right. Well, hey, we've got a great show today. We're really, really excited. And thank you for joining us, whether you're doing it live, in which case we invite you to send in your questions, or if you're watching the recording, in which case you can't. But we're delighted to have you here, podcast, webcast, or whatever. Today's guest, we'd like to welcome to the show our good friend, someone we both worked with in the past. Oh, you know what? Wait a minute. I got ahead of myself, Jonathan. I'm so giddy. I almost forgot to thank our sponsor. I'm out of control today. So let me back up. Sorry, Jeff. We'll bring you on in just a minute. We're just trying to get you worked up and excited. Before we start the show, we have to thank Epicor, who sponsored today's program. And so let me tell you a little bit about Epicor so you have some background. Today's episode of Wholesale Change is sponsored by Epicor, a company that has been helping thousands of wholesale distributors integrate all their business functions into one enterprise resource planning, or ERP, system for over 50 years. Because of their deep experience in the distribution business, they get you and your unique distribution challenges. Their ERP solutions were designed with distributors for distributors. That just means their solutions are built specifically with the right functionality for the distribution world. They're ready to use out of the box without complex and expensive customizations. It's one of the top reasons new customers tell Epicor they selected Epicor for distribution solutions over others. You can learn more about Epicor at epicor.com/distribution. Jonathan, you're the IT expert. Do you know of any distributors of any size that go through a ERP process without putting Epicor on the evaluation list?
Always on the consideration side.
Yeah, it is. You gotta talk to these guys. But Epicor, thank you so much for sponsoring today's program. We really appreciate it. Now that the time is actually right, let me bring in our guest, Jeff McLendon, who's the president and CEO of Specialty Building Products. I think building products specialty, we have it turned around. We have a little typo there just to keep you on your toes, Jeff. But I did have your logo under here, Specialty Building Products. So we got it half right today, which seems to be the tone of this episode so far.
Hey, good to see you guys. And I'm going to bring it down a little bit intellectually. I think we got PhDs and polymaths and polynomials, and I'm showing up with my SEC education from an ag school. So
no. I've already brought down the average. So we've taken care of that already.
Ian and I took a vote before this call. We decided you're the smartest guy on the call. So
and it was
see how that works.
It was 5-0.
Yeah,
because we used my math skills.
Yeah, and just to show you what a smart guy Jeff is, when I first met Jeff, his business was about 300 million.
Oh, don't tell him. You can't. We're not talking about his company size. It's just a lot bigger now.
Okay, but suffice it to say, the main letter after the number is a B now.
Well, yeah, it could be. It could be a T. I don't know.
Could be a T. Somewhere between a B and a T.
Yeah,
that's fair. You know, the regulators always get you on what you can talk about. So we're 12 or 15 times the size we were when you met us, John.
Wow.
So it has gotten bigger.
Wow.
Fantastic, Jeff. And you've been there a long time, right? I mean, it was previously called US Lumber. You guys changed in 2016? Is that right?
Yeah, it is. I've been here almost 20 years, and yeah, the platform company is US Lumber, and in the last 5 years or so, we've done a lot of acquisitions and realized that branding all of them US Lumber wasn't going to make a lot of sense for all kinds of reasons.
Right.
So, and what we sell is specialty building products, and so that's the umbrella name, and then we operate about 5 brands in the marketplace through we've folded some of those brands into other brands and operate some as customer facing brands, but one company. We're not a holding company model, just one integrated business.
Got it. So you have different brands, but they're integrated.
That's right, completely integrated. Well, so an example, so we bought Alexandria Molding based in Alexandria, Ontario.
Yeah.
And one of the premier molding distributors in North America, manufacturer and distributor. And we realized US Lumber would be a particularly bad name in Canada.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's right. And so
Yeah.
that's an example of what, so some of those brands are still in play. We bought Reed Door in the last fall. It'd be the best name there is in door distribution in North
Right.
America. And so that name needs to stay. But as we approach our customers, and whether it's from a US Lumber branch or an Alexandria branch or a Reed branch, they're dealing with one company, supplies dealing with one company. But those brands are really valuable. So the brands will stay.
I got to tell you, I love that. One of my pet peeves, I've been in marketing forever. I've been in branding forever, and companies easily disregard the market power of good brands. And they have this overriding compulsion. I really think it's ego driven. To take these great brands and rename them after the parent company, and they just squander all of that familiarity and awareness. And I've seen it over and over again. You're much better off in many cases doing what you're doing, which is keep the value that you've built up over decades, often, of this brand that you've acquired, and integrate the operations behind it.
Yeah, and what's helped us with adding the specialty building products name, like we had our big company meeting a couple months ago. We have all of our buyers and sellers and managers in for a pretty large meeting in Atlanta. And so it was branded specialty building products. And so now someone from Reed doesn't feel like they're coming to a US Lumber meeting because the platform was US Lumber.
Right.
And it's a blended family approach, and we're all under the same flag. This worked for us.
Yeah, and the Canadians would need a passport just to get into the meeting. That's not right.
Passport, 7 COVID tests, sign over your first child, all that.
I know, right? It's typical acquisition stuff. So, hey, Jeff, do you want? For those of you who are looking at the webcast, I do have a little page with your bio up here. Do you kind of want to walk us through your progression? Maybe talk about a little bit about where you grew up, how you wound up at the University of Georgia. Why you studied agricultural engineering at the time. My undergrad's in history, so I get it. You don't always work in the field you graduate in, and then talk about your career and some of the volunteer work that you do.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So I grew up in Athens, college town where the university is. My dad was a professor.
No kidding. What did you teach?
Engineering. So the engineering professor, and so college town was a great place to grow up. I looked at some other schools and thought about even maybe small school basketball. I could have sat on the bench at a small school and continued to play some basketball, but then just wanted a technical degree, wanted a big school environment. So I went to Georgia, and then kind of grew up first part of my career in a large Dutch engineering manufacturing, kind of a global engineering manufacturing company that had a facility outside of Atlanta that served the food industry. We made heavy high-tech equipment for the food industry, and came up to that kind of technical sales organization, product management organization is a good experience. And then in my early 30s, late 20s and early 30s, I went out and ran 2 IT startups for founding ownership.
Wow.
And it was kind of in the internet 1.0 era, although we were not internet companies, we were traditional business models. We did work and people paid us for the work, which seemed very odd at the time. But that was a great experience. Companies grew really fast. But realized I had young kids toward the end of that, and being a principal in a technology consulting business was a young man's game for a lot of reasons, especially having a young family. So I had met the founder of US Lumber. We were in a business group together in Atlanta, one of these kind of peer advisory kind of groups that was facilitated.
Sort of Vistage type of thing.
Yeah, a group like that, kind of similar to that. And we got to know each other through a few years in that group. And this particular group worked in kind of an ex officio board format where the host for that month would put a significant business issue out on the table for the group, and the group would give them some advice on it. And so Lawrence Newton, the founder of US Lumber, and I got to know each other in that environment. And he had grown a really successful business that was really, really entrepreneurial and really successful, but maybe a little bit stuck. And I was looking to do something longer term than technology ever ends up being.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lawrence wanted to move home to his family home in Alabama. And so I came almost 20 years ago and kind of succeeded Lawrence in the business, although he's still actively engaged and involved and key in our business.
That's great.
But I've operated the business for quite a while. And then we've gone through, different levels of ownership change and I'm kind of in our journey to scale and grow the business. So that's kind of how I got here.
So Jeff, suffice it to say, I'm a firm believer that people that have tech backgrounds whose parents were professors can do anything.
Exactly. That's what I think.
Yeah, that
So
reminds me. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, it's interesting. About 40% of the large company CEOs in America are engineers.
Wow.
So, the core learning from that, although I don't do anything hands-on very technical anymore, we have a lot of IT technology in our business. It's actually a big differentiator in our business. And I enjoy being involved in that. But it teaches you how to organize unstructured data and solve logical problems. So I think that's, some of the strength I bring to the business. For all the things they have to work around me on, I do bring some problem solving strength to the business, I think.
Yeah, it's a way of thinking, right? Even if you're not quote unquote technical anymore, and you and I are both long since that, there's a discipline to the way of thinking. So
right, exactly.
Yeah, one thing I learned when I was in graduate school is that no matter how complex business math gets, it's usually much easier than science math, engineering.
Right, exactly.
And so the people who come out of science backgrounds, whether that's the doctors who were in my MBA program or the engineers that come into business, they become very adept at financial accounting and other business math very quickly because it's relatively easy for them. And I think that's an important message for the people who come out of technical backgrounds, because it means you can move into the business leadership much more easily, because you have to be pretty good at that type of math in order to understand how the business is operating. It's also a good message for the people who feel like, well, I'm not great at math. Okay, well, you don't need to be able to do hard science math, differential equations, that kind of stuff to understand business math. And so you can come out of sales and marketing and learn the math necessary to be a business leader and not feel like the fact that you weren't good at, calculus is a barrier.
Right. Yeah. And I think just for somebody coming from a more technical background, then they've got to get the people side of things and the human side of things, because we lead humans, not math. And for the people that are coming more from a commercial background or market, they've got to get the math side of it. So you just got to go get the part that you don't actually identify with.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Ian, to your point about the most complex business math would be in the econ world, right? The people that are doing really advanced econometrics. That pales compared to even, what college physics students do, right?
That's right.
Right.
So.
Yeah, but it is a huge advantage. I mean, that was a gap I went to grad school to close. But this is kind of funny. We had a like top 10% of the class dinner, right? And I was voted class commencement speaker, which was sort of the Miss Congeniality Award. So in addition to the smart people, I got invited. And there were only like 78, 79 people in my class. We had 10 physicians. 7 of them were in the top 10% at this dinner. So because if you could go through medical school, there's nothing about the math that you see in business school that is comparable.
Right.
But hey, Jeff, so what of your particular skills, and I've seen this, you've facilitated a conversation with a couple of entrepreneurs at an NAW executive summit one year. And you're really known for this, is your ability to build a strong culture across generations. And I know I mean, you play video games with your younger employees, and I know that you said as soon as you're done with this, you're going to have your Atlanta soccer jersey on because Atlanta United, right? Because there's a game tonight. So, but building culture across generations, those kinds of interests are helpful, but that's not really the key of it, right? I mean, can you talk about sort of your philosophy about how you galvanize a team, regardless of the ages of the people on it?
Yeah, sure. It's probably interesting to talk about that at the regardless of the ages level. And then I do think there's some uniquenesses to younger generations that, kind of are tweaks in there, but so culture would be the most important thing we work on at SBP. When people ask me what causes you to lose sleep or what are you worried about, I'll say that we lose control of the culture. I think we can figure the rest of it out, but especially at a high growth rate, if we lose control of the culture, then you lose motivation, you lose your good people, you lose the secret sauce. So it's become clear to us as we worked on it, culture is not something you can actually work on, it's an outcome. A little bit like working on earnings. You don't work on earnings, you work on the things that lead to your earnings growing. Culture is like that. So I think culture is made up of what you value, how you've agreed to play together, and who you allow to stay. That's kind of how it frames up in my mind as we've worked on it.
Go through that one more time, Jeff. What are those three things?
Yeah, so what you value, how you've agreed to play together. And I don't think most organizations work on that one hard enough. So that's worth talking about a little bit.
Yeah.
And then who you allow to stay. If you get all that right, the who you get to hire will kind of work itself out. Because if you build a great culture and you're having success and growing, that attracts great people. Whether that's a new college grad or you need to fill a hole with an established manager in from an area because you're growing so fast that you can't build it fast enough. But, so the values thing, I think having values that you believe in, that you're consistent about, that you hire and fire to, that are authentic, that are real, sets the moral and purpose tone of an organization. Like an example, two of our core values. So one would be give credit where credit is due. Most of the credit is not due to you. So that's said in a really authentic way. And that's pretty easy to manage too. Right? If you've got somebody who's wanting to make sure that they get some credit for something that went on, or the spotlight gets shown on them, or they get, that's pretty easy to address. That violates a cultural rule. It violates a cultural norm in the business. And so that would be kind of almost a moral based value for us. We think that you got to give the credit somewhere else. And we say it in a way that's brandable. So another one that goes closer to purpose would be, we say that what we want to do, we want to use our influence to make a uniquely positive difference on the lives of the people that we touch. And that kind of captures the purpose statement of the company. I mean, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, the reason the rest of our senior team's doing what we're doing, is that running a growing, big, successful business gives us a platform of influence that we can use to speak into the lives of the people that we touch. So because of our platform of influence, I've got the chance to sit with a young lady in our corporate office here and help her figure out how she can be a better employee and max out her career, and also be a better mom and not have to choose between those two things. That's a platform of influence that I've got as a leader and our other leaders have that we need to do something with. That's just one example of how to do something with influence. But so that's a value statement that has a lot of purpose behind it. So we're saying to our leaders, growing your earnings, growing your income, growing your position, want all that, need all that. It's critically important, but that doesn't have any value in and of itself. How are we using that influence to actually make a difference? So having values like those two I described, that's something the human heart will rally around, and it's attractive to people. People want to be about something bigger than themselves, bigger than the dollar. And so it starts with core values.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying about recruiting really resonates with me. I haven't thought about it that way, but if you have people who share those values and that mission, then they're going to attract and screen for, in your recruiting process, people who share those values.
That's right. The culture becomes self-perpetuating. So, when you couple then having values you believe in, and that's an agreed upon way you play together, I think that's an underestimated part of running a business. When I think about my biggest job, it's that we have the right people on the right strategy and that we're playing together well. It's my job at the end of the day. Are we playing together well? Why aren't we playing together well? We got to play together well. And so as we've grown, we've done a better job being able to articulate the expectations around how we play together. It's a little bit different than values. It's on a different level or a different plane.
Yeah.
Like I thought I'd give you a couple examples from some of our leadership training that we do in our Leadership Institute. But we would say things as concrete as communicate in person whenever you can. Use a phone call if you can't. An email is a communication of last resort. So, and then that's a rule about how we play together. And it's pretty easy for leadership to model that. If somebody sends me some details in email, meeting arrangements, an outline for a meeting, an agenda, that's all a financial report. That's great.
Yeah.
Somebody starts a conversation with me in email, I will not respond to that conversation, and neither will any of our other leaders. We will walk in their office or pick up the phone. So let's have this conversation, because that's a rule about how we play together. We don't have conversation over email. So that's not right for everybody. I mean, that's right for us.
It is right for everybody. They just aren't doing it.
That may be true. And sometimes we acquire people that can be a little bit unnerving,
right?
Come out of a culture where, and so that's an example. Another example in our training is let's say, so leaders rise through the ranks, not because they ask for a promotion or ask for more responsibility, but because the tribe, we kind of talk about our group, because the tribe grants them more responsibility. And then later, the org chart recognizes that and says, hey, look, the tribe wants to follow Jennifer. We ought to take Jennifer and give Jennifer some more formal responsibility, because the tribe, she's already kind of grabbed it. And the tribe wants her to have it, and so we would teach all kind of stuff around there, around how you move up in the company. And so that would be another example of a way we've agreed to play together. And so that would be pretty broad for us. We'd be able to articulate it, and our leaders feel pretty passionate about it. That creates a coherent culture, right, where everybody understands what the rules of the road are and how it's going to work here. And again, we wouldn't think we've got all that right in some absolutist sense, but we do think we have it right for us.
Yeah.
And I think there are other ways you could do it other than how we're doing it. But I think you need a coherent way to do it. So if you have agreed upon values and agreed upon way you're going to play together, now it's leadership's responsibility to decide, so who gets to stay, and the primary thing, well, you gotta play like that, you gotta live like that, you gotta believe like that to stay. And then the culture becomes self-perpetuating, right? And when we'll find even a strong culture, it will expel things that don't fit. So our main job is perpetuating that stuff. I spend, in our senior team, we spend more of our time, working on that at 10 or 12 times as big as we were when we met you, Jonathan. I spend way more time on that, not less time on that than I did, 10 or 12x ago.
So you talk about hiring right, and that's N of one. In terms of fitting into the culture, and that you've essentially created, these are my words, you've created the sort of magnetic resonance that you're going to attract people that fit your culture. Acquisition's a whole nother area, right? So you're clear what you're doing with the brand, you're maintaining the brand and all the goodwill that goes with it. You've got your strategy for all the other things you integrate. But the hardest piece is this cultural thing. And how does that fit into this world that you're this exciting world that you're creating?
Yeah, it's definitely makes it hard. Makes it harder, and you have to do some things differently. Tell you some things we've learned along the way. When we're working on an acquisition target, we have to feel like it's culturally compatible. Cultures aren't the same; they're different. We have to feel like it's fundamentally culturally compatible. And then two big learnings that one was obvious and one wasn't as obvious. The one that's obvious that we've done is then we got to build trust before we work on change. Trust comes before change. Back to your leading people. And so that's so it's not, we're not going to show up with a playbook and here's how you do it because you're now SVP. And we got to build a relationship and figure out who's who and what do they care about, what are their hopes and dreams. And obviously we're trying to figure out the core business stuff, what's the real value proposition, how do they interface with customers, but that's not the real stuff. The real stuff is the people on the other end being heard, being known, being fully seen, us identifying with their hopes and dreams, us building some trust. And then in the context of trust, talking about change and how we're going to grow this business faster. Because for us, when we acquire somebody, it's always, how are we going to grow this business faster? Generally our strategy is SVP's got more product category to offer than these great businesses we bought. They're great and they've got X amount of product category. We've got X times. We want to put those products in. So we do that after trust being established. But the second thing is, this is what we've gotten better at. If there's something that doesn't fit from a culture standpoint, there's a leader, a person, there's a bully in the environment, there's a self-serving person in the environment, especially in a leadership role. If that exists, everybody already knows it. We just got to deal with it fast.
Right.
And if we'll deal with it fast, then the people in the acquired company go, okay, they mean what they say. This really is important to them. And you deal with a leader who won't fit culturally fast and firmly. That's a very effective way to sustain your culture.
Because it maintains the trust.
It does, and it says to people, these aren't just words that these guys mean it. And then the converse of that is, if you've got it in your environment in a key leadership position, especially in a leadership position, and you won't deal with it, there goes your credibility, right? So that sounds simple as I say it, and we all know this is all on a sliding scale, and a lot of it's in a gray area. So it's really complex in the real world. But when you know for sure that's a cultural problem, right? That's not going to get fixed. That cultural problem is going to go somewhere else and be somebody else's cultural problem. You just got to deal with that, especially in an acquisition, and not be scared of it.
Yeah, you've made some interesting points here I want to reflect on for a second, Jeff. So I've always believed that influence power is earned and authority power is granted, right?
Right.
And you've talked about how trust comes before change. Well,
right.
You don't necessarily trust somebody because they've been given the authority over you in a hierarchy. You trust them if they've developed influence with you, and influence comes from them earning that trust from you. And so whether it's an acquisition, a leader you've acquired through acquisition, or someone who's in your ranks, or someone you've hired in a new position, whatever authority they've been given is not going to enable change. It's the influence they've earned by creating trust among other people in the organization that will enable them to drive change.
That's right. And then you think about the bigger human motivation stuff within an organization. I mean, most of the people that we lead aren't really that motivated by the mathematical outcomes, right? Whether it's earnings growth or different ratios, or frankly, even their compensation. I mean, people want to be compensated fairly and they want to be able to grow it. They want to be rewarded for what they do. They should, but real motivation is deeper, right? We all know that. And that motivation of we're aligned, we're committed to each other. We know each other, we're committed to each other, we're committed to the same things. We have purpose behind what we're doing. Those are deep motivations that if you can tap into that stuff and attach to that stuff, now you've really got something. And
right.
You can drop strategies into that and get predictable results. You know, if you have the right skill sets. That's what we're after leaders, I think. But I spend most of my time thinking about that stuff. You know, I mean, we've got plenty of strategy issues and stuff we got to deal with as a business. But it's do we have the hearts and minds of our people, and are we playing together well? That's the ultimate key.
Got it. Yeah.
You know, the generational stuff, just to lob this in, I think the thing that's a little different for the younger generation, particularly our younger millennials and our Gen Zers, is different than, so I'm 55, I'm the oldest Gen Xer, different than my generation, people are a little bit older than me, people are, they want authentic relationship in a way that my generation really didn't. You know, even think about the way I was raised. I had a great family situation, great dad, but at the end of the day, I was kind of the lowest paid employee in the house. You know, dad was in charge and I was going to do whatever was said, and that's just how it worked. And the 24-year-old sitting outside my office, they had a different relationship with their mom and dad. You know, it's much more authentic, like my kids have with me. And so that's been brought to work. And so our 24-year-olds want an authentic relationship with our senior leadership, want an authentic relationship with me. And, you know, a Gen X or a 57-year-old out here is hoping I don't stop by their cube, because only bad things can happen if the boss stops by my cube.
Right.
You know, a 24-year-old is hoping I do stop by their cube. Right. And they want to know me. They do want to. I mean, I beat Will, 24-year-old from finance, in FIFA last Friday out in our break area. It was the greatest victory that's ever happened in all of athletics, when a 55-year-old beats a 24-year-old. But Will wants to play FIFA with me. Right. So Brian Lovingood, our COO, and I are taking about 40 20-somethings up to a camp in North Georgia mountains with us in a couple of weeks to play for 3 days. Wow. And to speak into their lives and spend time together. And there'll be some things that you would call training, be a lot of things that you would call ultimate frisbee and other stuff. And then we'll take another group in April, and we'll take another group the next September. We'll take another group the next April. And, you know, that's not the only thing we're doing to mix of people, but so it's Brian and I and 2 other senior leaders, but, you know, in groups of people, we touch a lot of people over a long period of time. And then when we see them in a sales meeting, or we see them in another company function, or they're in our leadership institute as a student because they're further along in their career, and we're trying to build individual trust and relationship and identification and that, I think that's real important for the younger crowd.
So Jeff, a leadership institute is really an unusual thing to have. Tell us about how that works and what your role in it and others' roles are.
Yeah, so it came out of 2 things, Jonathan. It came out of as we scaled the business and so many more people. Kind of back when I got to the point when I realized I'm not going to know every salesperson in the company, like really know them anymore. You know, it's just too big. And so we're trying to solve 2 things. How do we build leaders? Pretty obvious. And then we're trying to solve the issue of how does senior leadership stay connected enough to enough of the people in the business. And no, we had to be real intentional about that. So we put about 50 or 60 people a year through our Leadership Institute, where we're building leaders and senior, and it gives us a chance to be connected. So that group will be in town or in a town together for 2 to 3 days, 3 times over the course of the year, where we'll spend most of the time functionally working on leadership together, and then spend some social time around that. And it's 100% led by our senior leadership. So the 3 people that teach the most in that are Brian, our COO, and Ashley Kay, our VP of Sales, and me. And so, like we've got the second session for this class coming up next month in September, and I'm teaching about a 1.5 day unit on communication. And I'm teaching them a methodology for communication and a presentation. And then one of the books we've got them reading through there, we've broken the books up. Each group we've given, they'll have a chapter in that book. They already know they've got it. And they'll see me teach this communication methodology. And then I will demonstrate it by giving a talk using that methodology. And then they'll break up and go apart and come back and each give 7-minute presentations on the chapters from one of the books. Wow. Using that communication methodology, and we'll debrief it in real time. And I'll debrief it with them. So I'll have an 1.5 hours with them. I will have served them some, interacted with them, hung out with them at night, and then Brian's teaching a section on P&L management, our COO at the same time, and got some exercises for them to do there. And so Brian and I'll have 2 days with them, and as a second of 3 sessions. And so we're teaching them what we want to learn as leaders, but we're getting one-on-one time, we're serving them, we're getting to speak into them, they're hearing culture and strategy all from us. We got to do that. I mean, what more important thing can we do than try to build the leadership? So among all that, so Brian and I are each going to spend about 22 days a year on strategic people development.
Wow.
Camp Highland's an example, Leadership Institute's an example. I'm doing a fair amount of coaching in the business, as is Brian, where we're formally coaching existing and rising leaders through a process we've developed. That's the big deal in our environment. That's the best part of my job. I mean, if you want to have influence, you got to have a relationship. You got to build that. It's the very best part of my job.
Jeff, reflecting back on the work we did with you a number of years ago, what you are creating internally is also what you're creating externally, because we were talking about value proposition over the years, and all of this stuff is going to manifest in the value proposition, right?
Yeah, it does. It's surprising to me the degree to which it's seen externally. You helped us figure that out, Jonathan. You helped us figure out that our customers are seeing our core values, even though we weren't marketing it into our customers.
That's right.
As a result of some of that work you did with us, we began to market them to our customers, which wasn't really what we had intended. But people who come to our company meetings, suppliers who come to our company meetings, and people, the company gets this aura or halo around it. Hey, there's something different about that crew. There's something different there. Sometimes people can articulate it, sometimes they can't. But I'll tell you what it is so we're about something bigger. We're about something bigger, and it's intensely personal and human. Our platform is building materials distribution. That's what we do, and it's really important. It's really been serving our customers well, and that serving our suppliers well, and growing earnings so that investors are attracted to our business. All that stuff's really important. It grows our platform, but at the end of it all, there's something that's more important, and it's how we're touching the people. So when we go to Camp Highland in a few weeks with that group of young people, Brian and I'll do a talk together. We'll all sit in a circle and we'll do a talk one evening. That's what we would tell the 25-year-old us. So now I'm 55, Brian's 62. Saying if we knew what we knew now, we're talking to the 25-year-old us, what we would tell us. And some of that's really business-based and career-based, and some of that's just life-based.
Right.
And we'll have their full attention. I mean, I will have played Ultimate with them till 1 a.m. the night before on the field, had a bunch of laughs and run into each other, and somebody would have won or somebody would have lost. And you do that, and then you're investing that time. They're surprised that the COO and the CEO would take that time to go with them. They're going to listen to what we have to say, and we've got a chance to make a difference in their lives about what they find important and how they think about things and how they lead later as they become leaders here. what they do. And that's where the value is. I mean, that's where we're finding purpose.
Jeff, if I just interject something real quick, Jonathan, when you talk about intrinsic motivation, getting people to focus on something that's really important, and then the numbers are an outcome, the numbers aren't the goal. That reminds me a lot of what Jim Collins talks about, how, when you set a big, hairy, audacious goal, to use his words, it's not about achieving an EBITDA rate or sales. It's about something that connects the business goals with the goals of the individuals.
Absolutely.
And so we have a question from a listener who wants to know, this is kind of related to Jim Collins, I guess. What books do you use, if any, on leadership?
So the book that group's going to have to do the communication exercise on is Good to Great.
Oh, great. Good.
So that would be a textbook we use.
We didn't plan that, by the way. That just came out of the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's happened. So the two biggest books would be a part of our culture from a leadership standpoint. So Good to Great is a little bit of a textbook. It's less purely leadership focused, although the level 1 leader stuff's amazing, and then all that. But the other big one in our culture is Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So when we're building leaders and talking about, we spend a lot of time there, and a lot of what we believe comes there. It starts with the first dysfunction is absence of trust, right? Which leads to lack of healthy conflict, and et cetera. And that would be the other big one that we use.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Question for you. So we're talking about matters of the heart, in a sense. We're talking about experience, feelings, emotion. You're a quant guy. I know you as a quant guy.
Yeah, right.
What are you doing on measurement in all of this? We know any number of companies. It's almost like a deluge of companies that are doing ENPS. I don't know if you know Randy Eddy from US Electrical. He's done something called the Cultural Values Assessment. What are you doing on measurement?
Yeah, so we're slow to that on the culture side. We just hired a new CHRO, kind of helping us deal with this scale. And so we're down the path of some of that stuff that we're rolling out right now, Jonathan. We're slow to that. It's been more by feel on that side of the business. What's funny is, so I'm a quant guy, and we got a whole team of quant guys. Our rigor mathematically in our core business is unbelievable. And we've got a world-class data warehouse and business intelligence system, and so that is how we're wired. And so, but we're slow to that on measurement on the human side of that.
Interesting. Are you familiar with the book called The Loyalty Effect?
I am.
Yeah, because you're basically setting that up, whether you're measuring the internal side of it or not. That's what you're setting up, is that virtuous relationship between.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
So I think there's an interesting leadership point here. You think about, we've talked mostly about people, but you got this whole, what the business actually does and the earnings and all that side of the business, and finding our voice on that's been an interesting journey that I really like where we are. The media and culture has this narrative that companies are choosing profits or choosing people, right? And there's this divisive narrative out there that's like that. And so we're running right into that one, back to you saying, so we're just tying all that together, saying that what's really important is our influence and the difference we make in people's lives. But the company is our platform, and you've got hopes and dreams for your career and your earnings and all that. So the way we make all that work is grow the earnings of the business. That makes us stronger and safer in the marketplace, gives us a better strategic position in the market. It attracts investment. It allows us to grow the business. As we grow the business, it creates opportunity for the people that work here and the people that don't work here yet. And it gives us a platform of influence that we can actually do something useful with. So those aren't working against each other. Those are working for each other, right? Show me a company that has great, happy people and a great, happy culture that has declining earnings. That's not going to last long. Right. Show me a company that can sustain growing, really healthy earnings without having great people and a great culture. That's not going to happen long either. Those two things are synergistic. This narrative that there's a management team somewhere choosing, or a board somewhere choosing one over the other, people that are choosing, there's this short-sighted, they're going to tear down the company. And there's no way choosing, but those things work together, not apart. And we're articulating that, I think, reasonably well in the business and just trying to take all the air out of that conversation. Well, not let people believe there's a false choice being made somewhere that's not being made.
Yeah, I hear this, you'll get the question, well, what do you put first? The shareholders' interest, the employees' interest, or the customer's interest?
It's all the same.
Yeah, they are. I completely agree. If you're doing it right. And by the way, if you're in a company that in the short term can have a bunch of miserable employees who are slaving away to drive earnings, A, it's not sustainable. And B, who wants to work in a miserable environment like that?
No, it's not. And then people, I think leadership sometimes gets scared of the outside world.
Yeah.
I mean, we're PE backed. On our second PE firm, we've had fantastic PE partners who've been backed by Madison Dearborn and the Jordan Company, fantastic partners. But I talk just like this to them, right? I mean, they get it. They're enlightened, they get it, and they want the earnings growth. And when I'm talking to analysts, to debt investors, to equity investors, I'm telling this story, they get it. If you think about the ESG movement, I mean, there's things that are good about that. There are things that are probably out of balance on that, where the pendulum's got to go back a different direction. But the core part of that sort of business has to be about more than just the profit. Okay, well, that's good for society, right? Yeah. As a general notion. And so I think the world's coming our way. People want this. And so, instead of checking some boxes on some stuff to act like we've got an ESG program, I prefer to, so we're trying to lean into the lives of people and change them.
Yeah.
I think the world's coming this way.
Yeah. I mean, my experience is if you are recruiting properly and you have a good way of objectively evaluating talent, then the issues about diversity take care of themselves because you're naturally identifying the right people. So we're getting close to the end here, Jeff, but I did want to ask you about the role of culture when you're evaluating acquisitions. So, earlier in my career, I heard the hardest thing about acquisitions. Well, you got to make sure the business model's right. Then you have to figure out how hard the systems, the IT transitions are going to be. And people didn't really talk about culture. And I've seen it sort of turn that on its head over the years, where good companies, acquirers, are evaluating the culture first to see what's going to be the challenge in integrating this culture, in really making it compatible or making them part of our culture. And then they'll look at the other questions. How do you think about that? Do you sometimes get to a point where you're looking at an acquisition and the culture looks to be so hard, you just feel like it's not going to be something that you can accomplish, or it's not worth the effort? How do you think about culture and acquisitions?
We do kind of, this would be a little oversimplistic, but we're looking for the cultural blockers that would prevent us from kind of getting that acquired company and their culture over a bit of time to identify with the overall SBP culture, because that's going to happen. That's got to happen. We have to have a coherent culture. And so if we get in and we realize most of the people are going to gravitate to it and want it, like it, and what they've got is already compatible with it, but we're looking for what are the blockers. And you usually can't solve the blockers. You usually got to get rid of the blockers. Yep. And so for us, it's, can we get rid of that blocker? Right. Or those blockers, or are those blockers in such key tactical positions or so key to the earnings stream of that deal that the risk of getting rid of that blocker is probably too high, or the blockers, if it's pervasive, is too high, then we walk, and because we're walking in with the notion that we will not compromise culturally. So it's going to have whatever's got to go has got to go. Right. And in plenty of cases, nothing has to go, Yeah. It can all come and it's great. It assimilates over time. But I mean, there are lots of cases where people don't want to deal with the problem and it has to go. So can we make it go without destabilizing the business? That's our test.
Outstanding.
I worked with a guy who was a self-described deal jockey. I mean, he'd done, a couple hundred big deals, a lot of them in the telecommunications space. And he was looking at one where, and again, these were multi-billion-dollar entities. They put the two companies together, and he knew it wasn't going to work. The one company was, for lack of a better term, very focused on DEI. This is in the 90s. Right. Really super focused on DEI, had all the training about that and cultural sensitivity and awareness. The other was a bunch of cigar smoking, fist pounding East Coast types.
Yeah.
You could just see that this thing wasn't going to work, and it did come apart. And he said, culture is, for him, was the most important thing in making these deals work.
Yeah. Yeah, agree with that. And, a lot of cases we're buying great family businesses that are pretty sizable. We're not buying small things, buying great family businesses, but they have, because they're a family business, they have their capital resources and their risk tolerance is at a different level than ours. And so our core story is we can help this grow faster than it's growing today. That grow faster will create more opportunity for everybody that works here. Mm-hmm. There are going to be more of you and not less of you. So that walking in with that story is a pretty good starting point.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, we've been delighted to have you on today. We could talk for hours more, but we need to wrap up. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Great to visit with you guys. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So I do want to tell the listeners about a couple of upcoming programs that we have. On August 25th, we're launching a new webcast/podcast called The Discerning Distributor with Alex Chalsofsky. He's with Miller Resource Group. We do have a guest and sponsor now for that. We'll be announcing that soon. We're delighted to have this limited series with Alex. We're going to do 6 podcasts. You can go to distributionstrategy.com and sign up for that. On August 31st, the next episode of Wholesale Change, we'll have Mike Eichinger from Bay Fastening Systems. Bay is a relatively small distributor that's built a big marketplace, which is not supposed to be possible. No one told Mike. He's done it anyway. We hope you'll join us then. That one will be brought to you again by Epicor. You can learn about all of our events on distributionstrategy.com. All of our content is free. My contact information is down there. So is Jonathan's. Jeff's email address is on there if you want to reach out to him. Thank you so much for joining us today. Jonathan, as always, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Massive and mutual in return.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on August 25th. Until then, we wish you nothing but good things personally and professionally. Thank you for joining us today on Wholesale Change. Bye now.